3, 2, 1, go. So, once again, welcome to day 2 of DebConf. It is Monday morning. Thank you for all attending the talk. Weasel here, Chicago Python User Group, heard it all before. Is going to talk to us about packaging Python things. Take it away.
Hello. So, as Carl said, my name is Weasel. I have another name, but nobody but my mother and sometimes my employer calls me that. So today I'd like to talk about what happens if you delete setup.py. Carl did a pretty good job of introducing me. This is my cat. So yeah, there's a few things I'd like to cover just to start with. And the first one is that we're talking about software, and so stable is basically a synonym for slowly rotting. You can get something to the point where you're not fixing bugs, and that's great for you, except that doesn't stop anyone from filing CVEs against every part of your tool chain, including your operating system, the language you're working in, what have you. So best practice is a moving target, and generally there's a reason why. So in terms of Python packaging, Python Packaging Authority has actually started to employ a full-time developer to work on security. And there are a ton of things that have changed in recent years with how Python is packaged, and most of them are security related. So let's keep that in mind as far as why we want to care about new advancements in Python packaging. All right, that said, tools for doing this alone are a very broad topic. Probably everyone has a few that they love, a few that they hate, what have you. But basically, we can separate these into front-end and back-end categories. And since the focus of my talk today is to upgrade an existing project, I'm going to focus on back-end tools. Already covered this a little bit at the start, but we have a timeline of packaging. Distutils, which is probably the one that people are most familiar with, came out in 2000. It was released in October 2000 as part of Python 2.0. This was a tool that first introduced the Python setup install, Python setup develop, what have you, incantation. It was deprecated in 3.10, removed in 3.12. Setup tools was built on top of distutils. That came out in 2004. It had the idea of being one library with all the necessary tools to build and upload a project to PyPI. But that didn't last because ultimately pip replaced easy install in 2011. The upload command was deprecated in 2013 because, among other things, it didn't support HTTPS connections. And then 2015, we had PEP-517. 2016, we had PEP-518. And we've had several advancements along the way since those came out. The key being PEP-517 defined a minimal build API and a means of isolating the build environment. PEP-518 specified pyproject.toml. And then, of course, since then we've had the addition of setup.config, then the further addition that you can specify your metadata just in pyproject.toml. So we went over the security concerns, but there's always the whole why this was working. Well, it could be better. Problems that distutils and setup utils have suffered from the beginning were that the build environment is the same as the installation environment. So pip, setup tools, et cetera, are usually distributed with the interpreter. You can't be guaranteed that these are ever going to be updated in the life of an existing installation. So you could very well use new features of setup tools or PIP that will break until the user goes and upgrades that library. And sometimes it's not quite clear that that's what happened. Another concern is that you don't want your build dependencies to be present in the resulting runtime. So say you're packaging with Rust or building with Rust. You don't necessarily want that present in the installed environment as a dependency, for one thing, because it's a nightmare to package. But anyway, there's also what happens when someone goes nuts and defines something crazy in setup.py in code, or doesn't actually set up the path properly, doesn't update their versions, etc. We'll see at least one example of this in my demo part of the talk. Anyway, be that as it may, other reasons you might want to use the new system are it's actually easier. You can set your versions dynamically instead of having to hard code them every time you do a release. Maybe you just want to, or maybe you don't. You can still use setup.py to specify your config for setup tools. Anyway, so let's get to the interesting part. I had a few demos that I'd like to go through, but first let's look at some code examples. The first thing I'd like to look at is, let's see what Twisted did with setup.py back in 17.1.0, and then let's look at what they're using for packaging presently. So can people see this? Right. Is that better? Okay. So this is setup.py, and what we can see is, well, we know we can't import from the repo code into setup.py because we don't want loops. So what are we doing? We're opening another file and calling exec. So let's look at that file. This is a bit more involved. We see imports from distutils, setup tools. We have our metadata and our classifiers. Here's our extra options for dev, TLS, conc, etc. Specifiers for what's platform independent, requirements for the extras. We're setting all of the scripts on path, and building conditional extensions. And then we have this git setup args that is basically building the metadata based on what version of Python we're using. So this is several hundred lines of logic in order to determine, are we running on Python 2, Python 3, are we using CPython? I want to say are we doing Windows or POSIX also in here somewhere? If we want to look at present day, We don't have setup.py, but we do have setup.config. If we look at this, this is specifying the Flake 8 configuration and PyDoctor, which is the documentation tool. And we have PyProject.toml. So here we have the build system element that specifies the requirements for building the back end. Here we have project metadata and classifiers, dependencies. There's some legacy requirements because this is an older project and we're using tool.hatch.metadata hooks custom optional dependencies instead of project.optional dependencies. I understand there's some legacy reasoning behind this. I'm not quite familiar with why, but be that as it may. Here we have our extras. We have project scripts, URLs as part of the metadata. We're getting our version dynamically from the source code. And we have our build targets. I don't know about you. Here are our configs for our pre-commit hooks. I don't know about you. This is easier for me to read. But okay, so that's twisted. My second example I wanted to look at was cryptography. So, as some of you may know, this is cryptography, which is built using Rust for memory safety. Our build system element here defines that we're using Maturin to build it. And setup tools, those are our requirements. And we can't build it on PyPy. So again, here's the project element, the classifiers, optional dependencies for bcrypt, test dependencies, and here we're configuring our code cleanliness tools. Here we have MyPy, we have coverage, and we're still under 200 lines. All right, so that's some examples. I would like to get to the live demo part now. So for this, I'm going to repackage my contrived example called Sparkle Pony. This is a simple project that's currently packaged with both setup.py and requirements.txt. So setup.py, we are specifying one requirement. We're saying it works with the current supported versions of Python. Nothing terribly complicated. Although, if you notice, I've specified this as version 1.0. I don't have any tags. All right. Can people see this?
They
All right. How's that? Okay. All right, let's fix this. 'Cause otherwise, that's going to drive me nuts. All right. So first thing I'm going to do, because I'm going to work in a new project, I'm going to make a new virtual environment. Okay, so let's install this. All right. Now, I see I have tests. Let's try to run them. Interesting. My test dependencies aren't installed. So if we look at setup.py, I've only defined my runtime dependencies here. If we look at requirements, I have test dependencies here. Now, one would think that I can do this and it'll work. I pip install -r requirements.txt after I previously installed an editable install with pip install -e dot, except it still doesn't work. So the easiest fix for this is to make a new virtual environment and just install everything from requirements.txt. Oh, and now my test passed. If you're me, I'm also very irritated with the way this is packaged. So the first step in this, I'm going to create a PyProject.toml file. And I'm also going to copy from a working project because that's a lot more straightforward. So this is AIO Docker, which I feel comfortable copying from because I actually did the packaging to move it to use hatchling. So I have a reasonable amount of certainty about the code I'm copying. So I'm going to use hatchling as the build backend. This is the backend portion of the hatch project. And I'm going to use hatch VCS plugin for this. That allows me to get my version dynamically from the tags in my version control. Hatchling build is the build backend. And so Next, I want my project metadata. So the name of this project is what did I use for, I think this is under MIT, it is. Classifiers are fine because I think I supported everything from 3.8 to 3.12. My dependencies were requests. So obviously you want to tag your versions. I'm doing a live demo. This should be sufficient for our purposes today. So we do have optional dependencies. And these were for tests. All right. And I definitely want to tell Hatch that I want to get my version from source control. So we're telling it that the source of the version is going to be VCS. And I'm not going to configure pre-commit for the moment because, well, we don't really need it for this purpose. And PyTest should be fine with the defaults. So all right. So our next step here is to get rid of requirements.txt and setup.py. And now, just to be sure, let's create a new virtual environment. And so now I've got my regular dependencies installed, or at least I should. But I don't have my test dependencies. Now, okay, that's weird. Oh, lovely, it's trying to use 311 instead of whatever. The point is it installed PyTest when I told it to, without having to fall back to requirements.txt. But, all right, we can move on. We've upgraded to pyproject.toml. But now what I want to do is distribute this project. So the next thing I'd like to just demonstrate is we're going to build a wheel sdist and upload it to test.py.org. So to do this, I'm going to follow the instructions. And we're going to build the package with build. And then we're going to upload it using twine. All right. What happened here? That's why. Thank you. Where is the... I need the docs on this. There we go. Except we got a gotcha here. I don't have a version. So, remember when I said I was grabbing my version from source control? All right, now I've built new versions 2.0. And let's try to upload this again. So, here we have Sparkle Pony. Version 2.0. All right. So there we have it. Basically, it's pretty straightforward to use new style packaging. And there are enough guidelines that even if you want to stumble through doing a live demo, you can generally figure out what happened and fix your mistakes. And given that there are real security concerns, there are all the mess that I created for myself with my problems with the old style packaging, there are a lot of reasons to undertake the effort to do that. I will have the slides on GitHub if people want to look through it. I provided some resources here as far as background that I used to prepare this, and of course my Sparkle Pony project is on GitHub if you want to try to play with it yourself and try creating a test.py account. Anyway, that's all I had if people had questions.
First question of the morning. Hello, Amy. Wake up. Okay, let's try this again. We will get your working microphone too. Yes, yes. It says yes. Does anybody hear this? Check. AV is hard. I'm not hearing it. Do you hear it? Just check. Live demo of AV in action now. Is this good, maybe? Do you hear anything? Just checking. For those of you in the room, oh, maybe I hear myself. Hey, we're back.
Hey.
First question of the morning.
Yeah, so before the PyProject.ml existed, in the OpenStack world, people used PBR. Have you heard of it? It does many of the things that the PyProject.ml can do in a declarative way instead of having everything in setup.py. And I think it was great. Unfortunately, it didn't receive a lot of traction from the Python maintainers.
So you said a tool called PBR? I'm not familiar with that one.
Mike, audio.
I started using Python right around the time that PIP was released, and so it was mostly most of the back and forth was easy install versus PIP. So yeah, I'm not familiar with that one. Yeah.
I'll kill some dead air here with I thoroughly endorse the what was the project setup packaging.python.org. Whoever wrote those docs is a documentation genius. Go read them. Shall we wrap up? Any more questions? 3, 2, 1. Give it up for our first speaker of Tuesday, Monday.
Monday.